Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Nevada. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time at which you're listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing to which places and at what times of day or night these documented stories reach. In the unforgiving expanse of Nevada Territory, 1879, there existed a place known to locals as Willow Creek Ranch, situated some 30 miles northeast of Virginia City in the shadow of the Toyabay mountain range. What occurred there during that harsh winter would remain buried in county records and newspaper clippings for decades, only to resurface briefly in 1962 before once again fading into obscurity. The following account has been pieced together from courthouse archives, surviving correspondence, and testimonials documented by a historical society that no longer exists. The winter of 1879 brought unprecedented snowfall to Nevada Territory. Mining operations in the Comstock lode slowed to a crawl. Stagecoaches frequently failed to complete their routes along the Central Pacific Line, and ranches became isolated islands in a frozen desert landscape. Telegraph communications between settlements became irregular as lines collapsed under the weight of ice. It was during this period of profound isolation that Story County Sheriff Jacob Westmore disappeared while investigating reports of suspicious activity at Willow Creek Ranch, a modest cattle operation run by 3 women who had arrived from Pennsylvania 2 years prior. According to documents filed at the Virginia City Courthouse on April 17, 1877, the Blackwood sisters, Eleanor, Abigail, and Martha, had purchased the property with funds they claimed came from their deceased father's estate. The transaction was handled by a land agent named Frederick Holloway, who noted in his records that the women paid entirely in gold coin, an unusual choice that he mentioned in correspondence to a colleague, but did not investigate further. This letter would later be discovered among Holloway's effects after his own disappearance during a trip to Carson City in early 1878, a disappearance never connected to the Blackwoods at the time. The sisters kept to themselves, rarely venturing into Virginia City except for essential supplies. Local merchants described them as proper but cold, maintaining minimal conversation during transactions. Eleanor, the eldest, at approximately 35 years of age, conducted most business affairs. She was described in a newspaper account as tall and severe in appearance, with striking gray eyes that held one's gaze uncomfortably. Abigail managed correspondence with cattle buyers, while Martha, the youngest at perhaps 25, was seldom seen by anyone outside the ranch. On the rare occasions Martha appeared in town, she was noted to remain silent, standing slightly behind her sisters with downcast eyes. The Blackwood cattle operation quickly developed a reputation for exceptional quality despite the sisters' mysterious arrival to ranching, with no apparent prior experience. Their beef commanded premium prices at market, with buyers specifically requesting Blackwood beef for its distinctive flavor and tenderness. How 3 women with no background in ranching achieved such results became a subject of quiet speculation among the ranching community. Some suggested they employed a secret feed mixture. Others believed they had brought specialized breeding stock from the East. No one visited the ranch to investigate these theories. The sisters made it clear that uninvited guests were unwelcome. The sisters' isolation might have continued unremarked upon if not for the disappearance of a cattle buyer named Thomas Harrington in November of 1879. Harrington, a representative of a Sacramento-based meat supply company that provisioned mining operations throughout the region, had traveled to negotiate the purchase of the Blackwood herd. According to the stagecoach driver who delivered him to the junction road leading to Willow Creek, Harrington was in good spirits, mentioning his intention to complete business quickly and return within 2 days. He carried a considerable sum, the driver, Ezekiel Palmer, later testified. Not unusual for his profession, but he made a point of showing me the money belt beneath his vest. Said he expected to purchase at least 40 head if the quality was as represented. I advised him against such displays in these parts, but he laughed it off. Said the Blackwood women weren't the type to concern him. Too refined, he called them. When Harrington failed to return to Virginia City for his scheduled departure, the stagecoach company notified Sheriff Westmore. Initial inquiries by telegraph to Sacramento confirmed Harrington was a respected businessman with considerable financial interests and a family awaiting his return. His unexplained absence raised immediate concerns, particularly given the substantial funds he carried. A journal entry found among Harrington's belongings at the Virginia City Hotel, where he had secured lodging prior to his journey, revealed his eagerness to inspect the Blackwood cattle. Nov. 12, 1879, reports of the exceptional quality of the Blackwood herd have reached even Sacramento. If half of what I've heard is true, securing exclusive purchasing rights would represent a significant coup for the company. Mr. Hollister believes the unusual flavor reportedly characteristic of their beef would command premium prices from our more discerning clients. I depart tomorrow with sufficient funds to secure 40 head and possibly negotiate future rights. Sheriff Westmore's deputy, a young man named Calvin Reed, documented the sheriff's intention to visit Willow Creek Ranch on December 12th, after receiving no word from Harrington for nearly a month. Sheriff departed at first light, Reed wrote in the logbook preserved in county archives. Expected return by nightfall. Weather clear but cold. The logbook entry concludes with a simple notation added later in a different ink. No return. What makes this case particularly disturbing is what followed in the subsequent weeks. Deputy Reed, concerned by the sheriff's failure to return, organized a search party consisting of 4 local men. Silas Drummond, a tracker who had served as scout for the U.S. Cavalry. Brothers James and William Ferguson, miners who volunteered their services, and Dr. Lew. Horace Winters, the county physician. Heavy snowfall delayed their departure until December 18th. The party returned on the 20th with a troubling report, documented in statements taken under oath and preserved in county records. According to these sworn statements, the men found Willow Creek Ranch apparently abandoned. No livestock remained in the corrals or barn, though feed and water troughs showed signs of recent use. The main house stood empty of personal belongings, though furniture remained. Dr. Winters noted in his statement, the dwelling showed evidence of methodical packing rather than hasty flight. Drawers had been emptied, but items were selected with care. Only objects of a personal nature had been removed. Functional household goods remained in place. The exception to this orderly departure was the kitchen, where the search party discovered a meal half prepared, vegetables partially chopped on a cutting board, a Dutch oven still warm on the stove, containing what appeared to be a stew in the early stages of preparation. A single woman's boot stood in the doorway, as if dropped during exit. These details suggested a sudden interruption to routine activities. Most significantly, the search party discovered the remains of a large bonfire approximately 100 yards behind the main house, partially covered by recent snowfall, but still containing hot embers at its core. Within the ashes, they found what they described as metal objects consistent with badge, belt buckle, and gun parts, along with what appeared to be severely charred bone fragments. The men collected these items in a flour sack and returned to Virginia City. Silas Drummond's tracking skills revealed additional disturbing details not included in the official report, but mentioned it in his personal journal, discovered among his effects after his own death in 1881 from what was officially recorded as heart failure. Drummond wrote, found drag marks from house to fire pit, not continuous, as if a heavy burden was carried part way, then dragged when the carriers tired. Snow had filled most impressions, but enough remained visible. 3 sets of footprints, small, consistent with women's boots. 1 larger set that abruptly ended at the fire site. I kept this observation from Reed. The young man seems unduly disturbed already. The subsequent investigation faced numerous obstacles. A blizzard struck the region on December 21st, rendering travel impossible for nearly 3 weeks. By the time authorities could properly examine the ranch, Melting snow had compromised much of the physical evidence. The metal objects found in the fire pit were determined to be consistent with a lawman's equipment, though definitive identification proved impossible given the technology of the era. The bone fragments were examined by Dr. Winters, who concluded they were human, but could offer no further specifics regarding identity. According to county records, Dr. Winters requested permission to send the bone fragments to a colleague at the University of California who specialized in forensic examination, but this request was denied by the territorial governor's office. The official reason cited was unnecessary expenditure for a likely transient crime, though Winters noted in his personal correspondence that he suspected political interference. The notion that respectable women might be implicated in such activities appears to discomfit certain officials, he wrote to a medical colleague in San Francisco. There seems a determination to classify this as a typical frontier disappearance rather than pursue the more disturbing implications. The most compelling evidence came from a partial journal found wedged behind a chest of drawers in the main house, apparently overlooked in the sisters' departure. The journal, attributed to Martha Blackwood based on comparison with known correspondence, contained fragmentary entries that raised disturbing questions about the women's past and activities. One entry, dated October 1878, reads, "E says we must be more careful. The method used on the traveler was unnecessarily messy. A has devised a cleaner approach for the next one. We cannot afford another incident like Pennsylvania. The authorities there were growing suspicious before our departure. E says Nevada territory offers more privacy and fewer questions." Another entry described the cattle operation. The cattle respond well to the special feed mixture. Buyers remark on the unique flavor of the meat. A says this is ironic in ways I fail to appreciate. E reminds us that prosperity depends on discretion. The cellar modifications are complete. The sound dampening measures proved effective during the drummer's visit last month. A disturbing entry from May 1879 states, "Today marks our 7th guest since establishing the ranch. E says we've refined our method considerably. The rendering process, A, developed for the excess, ensures nothing is wasted. The cattle thrive on the supplemental feed. E says we are approaching a perfect system, sustainable and profitable." The most concerning entry, the final one dated December 10, 1879, reads, "A man from Sacramento arrives tomorrow. E has determined he carries sufficient funds to justify special treatment. After this one, we may need to move on. E says Nevada territory is becoming too populated for our particular requirements. The incident with the land surveyor last month nearly brought unwanted attention. A has identified several promising locations in Wyoming territory. More remote, fewer questions. E says we've extracted maximum value from this operation. After the Sacramento man, we will begin preparations for departure." Several pages had been torn from the journal, leaving gaps in the narrative. The remaining entries contained numerous references to the cellar and processing, though without explicit context. One partially legible entry mentioned rendering equipment and bone meal integration, in what appeared to be a discussion of cattle feed formulation. During the investigation, telegrams were sent to authorities in Pennsylvania seeking information about the Blackwood sisters. The response, preserved in courthouse files, stated only that 3 women matching their description had been questioned in connection with the disappearance of 2 land agents near Pittsburgh in 1877, but insufficient evidence had led to their release. The investigating officer, a Lieutenant James Hollister, noted, "The women presented compelling documentation of their activities during the relevant period. Their social standing and evident refinement made serious consideration of their involvement implausible to my superiors. The case remains open, but inactive." A follow-up inquiry revealed that Lieutenant Hollister had been removed from the investigation shortly after questioning the women, reassigned to patrol duties in a remote district. His commanding officer cited excessive imagination and inappropriate fixation on respectable female citizens as the reason for the reassignment. Hollister reportedly suffered a breakdown 6 months later and was committed to the Western Pennsylvania Hospital for the Insane, where he died in 1879. Hospital records indicate he frequently spoke of well-bred women with appetites that cannot be mentioned in polite company. The investigation took an unexpected turn when a stagecoach driver reported delivering 3 women matching the Blackwood sisters' description to Elko, Nevada, where they reportedly boarded an eastbound train. According to the driver's statement, the women traveled with numerous trunks and cases, the kind used by prosperous people relocating with their valuables. He particularly recalled that one trunk emitted a peculiar odor that one of the sisters explained as preserved specimens for scientific study, claiming they had a cousin who was a natural historian at an Eastern university. The driver's account included one detail not present in the official record, but mentioned in his personal correspondence with a colleague. The youngest one kept looking back toward Virginia City as if expecting pursuit. The eldest noticed my observation and said something that made the young one compose herself immediately. There was something in the way the elder woman spoke, quiet-like but with unmistakable authority, that raised the hair on my neck. I was glad to see them board that train, and gladder still to depart Elko without them. Authorities in several states were notified of the women's possible movement, but no confirmed sightings were ever documented. The trail went cold at Elko, though unsubstantiated reports placed women of similar description in Denver, Colorado, in early 1880. In March of 1880, Deputy Reed, now acting sheriff following Westmore's disappearance, received a letter postmarked from Denver, Colorado. The letter, written in elegant script on quality stationery, contained only one sentence. The sheriff made the most delightful sounds as the flames embraced him. The letter was signed simply, "The Sisters Blackwood." The Denver postmark prompted Reed to contact Colorado authorities, but the letter had been processed through a central post office serving a population of over 35,000, making identification of the sender virtually impossible. A handwriting analysis was attempted by comparing the letter to known samples of Eleanor Blackwood's correspondence, but experts could not definitively confirm or deny a match given the limited comparison material. Reed, disturbed by the implications, ordered a more thorough search of the Willow Creek property once spring allowed proper access. According to county records, excavation of the ranch's root cellar revealed a disturbing discovery. Beneath a false floor lay a hidden chamber approximately 15 feet square, with walls lined in sheet metal. The chamber contained personal effects, watches, wallets, boots, and other items, belonging to at least 7 different individuals based on monograms and inscriptions. Among these items was a pocket watch bearing Thomas Harrington's initials and a land survey map with the name Frederick Holloway inscribed on its case. Most disturbing were the butchering tools found hung with meticulous care on the chamber walls. Cleavers, bone saws, and knives of various sizes, all immaculately maintained. A workbench with leather restraints occupied the center of the space. The floor featured a sophisticated drainage system leading to a covered pit. The implications were clear, though newspapers of the era reported only that evidence of foul play had been discovered. Dr. Winters, who examined the chamber, wrote in his private notes, "The facility exhibits careful planning and methodical execution, not the work of frenzied minds, but of calculated intelligence. The tools suggest familiarity with butchering techniques. Most disturbing was the organization. Each implement had its designated place, marked on the wall with precise outlines. This suggests routine activity rather than occasional use. The drainage system was ingeniously designed to handle significant volumes of fluid while preventing odors from escaping. One cannot help but admire the technical proficiency while being horrified by its apparent purpose." Near the workbench, investigators discovered a leather-bound ledger containing what appeared to be records of transactions. The entries followed a consistent pattern: a date, a name or initial, a weight recorded in pounds, and a monetary value. The final entry, dated December 12, 1879, the day of Sheriff Westmore's disappearance, read simply, J.W. 204 Elbias, no sale value. Disposal only. The ledger contained additional notes regarding the rendering process and feed integration, with detailed calculations of weight-to-feed ratios. One page contained a diagram of what appeared to be a modified meat grinder with annotations regarding bone separation and pulp consistency. The implications of these notes, combined with the sisters' reputation for exceptional cattle, led investigators to a disturbing conclusion that was deliberately omitted from public records. Further excavation revealed a secondary chamber connected to the first by a narrow passage. This room contained equipment consistent with rendering operations, large metal vats, straining implements, and a custom-designed furnace. The floor of this chamber sloped toward a central drain that connected to a series of pipes leading to a distant field. Analysis of soil samples from this field reportedly showed unusually high concentrations of organic material, though the exact nature of this material was not specified in official documents. A sealed metal container found in the rendering room contained a substance identified as bone meal and organic matter in a state of partial decomposition. Dr. Winters noted in his examination report that the substance appeared to be formulated for livestock consumption, though he declined to speculate on its specific composition. The report was subsequently classified and removed from public records by order of the territorial governor. The case remained active for approximately 1 year before being designated unsolved due to the disappearance of the primary suspects. In an unusual administrative decision, records related to Willow Creek Ranch were sealed by territorial authorities in 1881, cited as potentially disturbing to public sensibilities and likely to incite unnecessary panic regarding frontier security. This official sealing of records might have been the end of the matter. The story might have remained entirely forgotten if not for historian Margaret Wilson, who in 1962 petitioned for access to sealed territorial records while researching frontier justice practices for her doctoral dissertation at the University of Nevada. Wilson's petition cited academic interest in cases involving female criminals in the territorial period, a subject she claimed had been underrepresented in historical research. Wilson's petition faced significant resistance from certain university administrators and state officials. According to correspondence found in her files, one senior administrator warned that some historical matters are best left undisturbed. When Wilson persisted, she reportedly received an anonymous letter advising her to seek safer academic pursuits. She documented these obstacles in her research journal, noting, "The resistance I encounter seems disproportionate to what should be a relatively obscure historical matter. This only increases my conviction that something significant lies buried in these records." After months of bureaucratic obstruction, Wilson's petition was granted following intervention by a sympathetic judge with an interest in historical preservation. The records she received, however, showed evidence of selective redaction. Entire sections had been removed, and certain documents referenced in indexes were missing entirely. Despite these limitations, Wilson assembled a compelling narrative from the remaining materials. Wilson's notes, discovered after her disappearance later that same year, contained transcriptions of the original investigation documents along with her own observations. The notes were found in her campus office, neatly organized as if deliberately left for discovery, though Wilson herself had vanished without notification to colleagues or family. Wilson wrote, "What strikes me about the Blackwood case is the sisters' remarkable self-sufficiency in an era when women rarely operated independently, especially in frontier settings. Their background remains mysterious. No record of a Blackwood family of their description exists in Pennsylvania records I've examined. The possibility that these women assumed false identities is significant." Her notes continue, "Most disturbing is my discovery of similar cases following the sisters' disappearance from Nevada. 3 women matching their description were briefly investigated in connection with disappearances in Colorado, 1881, Wyoming, 1883, and Montana, 1885. In each instance, the women established isolated homesteads, developed unusual but profitable livestock operations, and departed suddenly following disappearances of local men. The pattern suggests a methodical operation that may have continued for years across the western frontier. Wilson had mapped these suspected locations, noting striking similarities in their selection. Each property was situated within reasonable travel distance of established routes, but isolated enough to discourage casual visitors. Each featured natural features conducive to concealment of activities. Each was purchased through intermediaries who subsequently disappeared. In reference to the Wyoming case, Wilson noted, the Triple Creek Ranch, operated by the Barlow sisters from 1882 to 1883, bears remarkable similarities to the Willow Creek operation. The women were described as refined Easterners who rarely socialized. Their cattle brought premium prices at market. The ranch was abandoned shortly after the disappearance of County Sheriff Thomas Layton, who had traveled to investigate reports of a missing peddler. Records indicate discovery of a modified root cellar with suspicious staining and implements consistent with butchering operations. Most tellingly, a partial letter found on the premises referenced Our Nevada Method and the profitable lesson of Sheriff W. Wilson identified additional cases that fit the pattern: the Riverside Farm in Colorado, 1880-1881, operated by the Whitfield sisters; the Clearwater Homestead in Montana, 1884-1885, run by the Blackett cousins; and the Pinecrest Ranch in Idaho, 1886-1888, managed by the widow Blackwood and her sisters-in-law. In each case, the women established reputations for exceptional livestock, maintained minimal social contact, and departed following local disappearances. By the time authorities conducted a thorough search of the property, the women had departed. Most significantly, Wilson discovered a personal journal belonging to Sheriff Thomas Layton of Wyoming Territory, who disappeared in 1883 while investigating the Triple Creek Ranch. The journal had been preserved as evidence, but subsequently misfiled and forgotten. Layton's final entry read, "I depart tomorrow for the Triple Creek property. Deputy Miller advised against going alone, citing the Westmore incident in Nevada. I assured him the situations are entirely dissimilar. These women are respectable citizens with no connection to that unfortunate business. Still, I shall exercise appropriate caution." Wilson's research led her to explore possible origins of the Blackwood sisters before their appearance in Pennsylvania. She found tantalizing suggestions in newspaper accounts from Boston, 1872-1873, regarding 3 sisters who operated a successful boarding house catering to single businessmen. The establishment closed abruptly, following inquiries into the disappearance of 2 regular lodgers. The proprietors, who used the surname Blackwell, departed Boston before formal investigation commenced. Similar patterns emerged in records from Chicago, 1874-1875, where 3 women operated a small hotel catering to livestock merchants visiting the stockyards. The hotel, known for its exceptional private dining room serving unique regional specialties, closed after several guests vanished without settling their accounts. The proprietors had departed before authorities connected the disappearances to the establishment. Wilson's final entry, dated September 18, 1962, reads, "I've located what appears to be a living descendant of Deputy Reed who claims to possess letters never submitted to authorities. I'm traveling to a small town outside Reno tomorrow to examine these documents. If authentic, they may provide insight into the sisters' methodology and motivation." The descendant, a woman named Elizabeth Reed Gardner, sounded peculiarly interested in my research. She mentioned having family records that might shed light on the case. Our telephone conversation was brief, but left me with an uneasy feeling I cannot quite articulate. Nevertheless, the potential historical value compels me to investigate. Wilson never returned from this meeting. Her automobile was discovered abandoned near the historical site of Willow Creek Ranch, which by then had been reclaimed by the desert. Despite an extensive search, no trace of the historian was ever found. The investigation into her disappearance was eventually suspended due to lack of evidence. Local authorities noted that the area where her vehicle was found experienced frequent sandstorms that could have obscured footprints or other evidence. The investigating officer, Deputy Samuel Garrett, documented finding Wilson's research materials neatly arranged on the passenger seat of her vehicle, as if placed there deliberately. A single page had been removed from her notebook and replaced with a pressed flower, Blackwood, which Garrett described as unusual for the region and appearing to have been preserved for some time. The significance of this detail was apparently lost on Garrett, who had no knowledge of the historical case Wilson had been researching. In a curious postscript, the university department received a package 3 weeks after Wilson's disappearance. It contained her research materials along with a note, written in elegant script on aged paper. Some histories are best left undisturbed. The sisters' legacy continues through careful hands. University officials turned the materials over to authorities, but analysis proved inconclusive. The paper and ink appeared genuinely aged, dating to the 19th century, yet the content clearly referenced contemporary events. The package contained one additional item not mentioned in official reports but documented in the personal journal of the department secretary who first opened it. A small glass vial containing what appeared to be bone meal. A handwritten label affixed to the vial read simply, MW 138 lbs, academic value only. The secretary, disturbed by the implications given Wilson's disappearance, apparently disposed of the vial before authorities arrived to collect the materials. No record of an Elizabeth Reed Gardner could be found in Nevada or surrounding states. When investigators attempted to trace the telephone call Wilson had documented, they discovered it had originated from a public telephone booth in Reno. The booth was located across the street from a small butcher shop specializing in premium aged beef. The shop had opened 6 months earlier and closed permanently the day after Wilson's disappearance. The investigation into Wilson's disappearance took an unexpected turn when a university colleague received a postcard from Elko, Nevada, apparently signed by Wilson and indicating she had decided to pursue research in more remote locations. The colleague, familiar with Wilson's handwriting, expressed doubt regarding the authenticity of the signature, but authorities considered the postcard sufficient evidence to classify Wilson as voluntarily missing rather than the victim of foul play. The proprietor, described in business records as E. Blackwood, had provided documentation that later proved fraudulent. The most troubling aspect of the case emerged during a routine archival digitization project in 1968. A courthouse clerk in Virginia City discovered that the original investigation files related to Willow Creek Ranch had been removed from sealed records, not recently, but apparently decades earlier, based on the condition of surrounding documents and filing system. In their place was a single sheet of paper bearing 3 pressed flowers, willow, Blackwood, and a sprig of Nevada sagebrush. Written below in faded ink were the words, "We adapt, we persist, we thrive." The clerk, Robert Chambers, reported this discovery to his supervisor, who instructed him to document the missing files but pursue no further inquiry. Chambers, intrigued by the mysterious substitution, conducted independent research during his personal time. He discovered that the Willow Creek case was not the only instance of missing records. Files related to unexplained disappearances in Virginia City between 1877 and 1879 had similarly vanished from archives. Chambers documented his findings in a personal journal, noting, "The pattern of missing records suggests deliberate removal by someone with knowledge of archival systems and access to secure repositories." The disappearances documented in these missing files share common elements. All victims were men of means with no local connections. All had business dealings that brought them to remote locations. None were ever found. Most disturbing is the timing. These records appear to have been removed in 1962, shortly before Dr. Wilson began her research. Subsequent inquiry revealed that various historical records related to the Blackwood case had been systematically removed from multiple repositories over the years. A pattern emerged. Whenever official interest in the case resurfaced, records would mysteriously disappear shortly thereafter. More disturbing was the discovery that individuals involved in these inquiries often experienced personal misfortune, reassignment, resignation, or in 3 documented cases, disappearance. Chambers himself became part of this pattern. After documenting his findings in a report submitted to the Nevada Historical Society in 1968, he was found dead in his home from what was officially classified as suicide. The report was never formally acknowledged by the Society, and Chambers' personal research materials disappeared from his residence before family members could collect his effects. Local legend holds that the land where Willow Creek Ranch once stood remains unusually barren even by desert standards. Cattle refuse to graze there, and travelers report an inexplicable sense of being watched. These are, of course, merely folklore embellishments to an already disturbing historical case. What can be stated with factual certainty is this. Between 1877 and 1885, at least 11 men disappeared in connection with properties owned by 3 women matching the Blackwood sisters' description. The true number may be higher. No arrests were ever made. No conclusive evidence of their fate after 1885 exists in any known record. Perhaps most unsettling is what Deputy Reed wrote in his personal journal, found among his effects after his death from apparent suicide in 1883. I dream of them still, not as monsters, but as proper ladies serving tea. They smile as they pour, and I drink despite knowing what flavors the brew. In my dreams I understand their purpose, though upon waking I cannot recall it. I only remember Eleanor's parting words in that Denver letter never submitted to evidence. In a world where men view women as prey, we merely reverse the natural order. The true perversion was not our appetite, but that no one suspected us capable of it. Reed's journal contained additional disturbing entries not included in official records. In one, dated July 1880, he wrote, "Received another letter today, postmark from Wyoming Territory. No signature, but I recognize the hand. It contained a small package, a piece of dried meat, with a note reading, 'A taste of the sheriff. He continues to serve a purpose.' I burned both, but cannot remove the memory. I find myself wondering if I recognized the flavor." Another entry suggests Reed may have had more knowledge than he officially disclosed. The cellar chamber design was ingenious. When I revisited the ranch in June, I noted aspects overlooked in the official examination. The drainage system connected to a secondary pit, where rendering operations apparently occurred. The sisters wasted nothing, not even the bones, which showed signs of being ground to meal. The cattle feed formulation found in Abigail's notes now makes horrifying sense. I have destroyed this evidence. Some truths should not enter public record. Reed's journal documented his increasingly paranoid state as months passed. I see them everywhere now. Every woman of a certain age and bearing causes me to start. Yesterday I nearly drew my weapon on a traveling milliner who reminded me of Abigail. I cannot sleep without dreaming of the cellar chamber and what must have occurred there. The doctor has prescribed laudanum, but it only makes the dreams more vivid. A final entry, dated 3 days before his death, reads, "They are watching me." I see a woman matching Eleanor's description in town yesterday, though she departed before I could approach. This morning I found a pressed flower, Blackwood, on my doorstep. They want me to know they haven't forgotten. Perhaps joining the sheriff is preferable to this constant vigilance. I keep my gun loaded now, though I suspect it would provide little protection against their methods. The historical record offers no further insights into Reed's final days. His death was ruled suicide after he was found with a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. The investigating coroner noted that Reed's residence showed signs of meticulous cleaning and organization untypical of suicide cases. All personal papers had been neatly arranged except for the journal, which was found clutched in his hand. The coroner's report contained one detail, later redacted from official records. Reed's final meal appeared to be a stew of unknown meat, still warm on the stove, when his body was discovered. Analysis of the stew's contents was not performed, as such forensic techniques were not standard procedure in the era. The Blackwood sisters, if that was indeed their real name, vanished into the fabric of American westward expansion. Their story represents a disturbing counter-narrative to frontier mythology, not of lawmen and outlaws engaged in righteous battle, but of methodical predators who understood that the best camouflage was society's unwillingness to see women as capable of calculated violence. A final note of historical interest: between 1880 and 1900, newspaper records across the western states document a curious pattern. In various remote communities, exceptionally successful cattle operations would appear, run by widowed sisters or female cousins, producing meat of remarkable quality that commanded premium prices. These operations typically lasted 2 to 3 years before the proprietors moved on for health reasons or family obligations. In several instances, these departures coincided with local disappearances. In 1897, a Denver newspaper published a small item regarding the Triple B Ranch outside Laramie, Wyoming. The Burroughs sisters, whose exceptional beef has graced Denver tables for the past season, announced their retirement and relocation to undisclosed eastern destinations. Their property has been sold to the Wilson Cattle Company. The community will miss their contribution to local commerce, though some may rest easier knowing Sheriff Patterson need no longer investigate the curious case of the missing cattle inspector, whose horse returned riderless from the direction of the Triple B last autumn. The pattern continued into the early 20th century, though with notable adaptations to changing times. A 1908 report from the Montana Department of Agriculture noted the unusual success of the Black Sisters Meat Preservation Company, which operated a small processing facility near Helena from 1905 to 1907. The operation, run by 3 unmarried sisters of advancing years but remarkable vigor, produced canned meats of exceptional quality and distinctive flavor. The facility closed following inquiries into the disappearance of a health inspector assigned to examine their operations. By the 1920s, such operations had become less frequent, possibly due to increased regulation of food production and improved communication between law enforcement agencies. The last documented case that fits the established pattern occurred in 1927, when 3 elderly women operating a remote roadside diner in Idaho fled following the disappearance of a traveling federal revenue agent. Local authorities investigating the abandoned diner reportedly discovered a hidden cellar containing implements of concerning nature and a ledger with entries consistent with those found at Willow Creek nearly 50 years earlier. The historical society that briefly maintained Wilson's research materials closed in 1969 due to funding issues. The materials were scheduled for transfer to state archives, but reportedly never arrived. The transport driver claimed to have delivered them as instructed, but no receipt was ever found. The driver left his position shortly thereafter and was noted to have purchased a remote ranch property in Idaho, though subsequent inquiries found no record of the man at the listed address. A librarian who had assisted Wilson in her research suffered a home invasion shortly after the historian's disappearance. Nothing of value was taken, but all notes relating to the Blackwood case were removed. The librarian reported that one of the intruders was a woman of refined appearance and advanced age, who spoke with the accent of an educated Easterner. The case was never solved. What happened at Willow Creek Ranch in the winter of 1879? What became of Sheriff Westmore, cattle buyer Harrington, and potentially numerous others? The historical record provides disturbing suggestions but few definitive answers. We are left with fragments, journal entries, scattered testimonies, and the unsettling implication that the Blackwood sisters may represent one of the earliest documented cases of serial predators operating in the American West, their activities obscured by both the vastness of the frontier and the period's inability to conceive of women as capable of such calculated violence. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this case is not what we know, but what remains hidden, possibly deliberately, from historical record. Some secrets of the Nevada frontier may be best left buried beneath the desert sands, where the wind still whispers through sagebrush with sounds that, if one listens too closely, might resemble the distant crackling of flames and what Deputy Reed described as the most delightful sounds of a man's final moments. The case files remain officially open but inactive. The location of Willow Creek Ranch has long since been reclaimed by the Nevada desert, its precise coordinates lost to time. Only the story remains, passed down through fragments of historical record and the occasional whispered warning among the oldest families of Story County. Beware of hospitable women in isolated places and never, under any circumstances, comment on the unusual flavor of the meat they serve. For those inclined to dismiss this account as mere frontier legend, consider this. In 1968, shortly before the Historical Society's unexpected closure, its director reported receiving a package containing a single item, a lawman's badge, partially melted, with traces of what appeared to be charred organic material embedded in its surface. The package bore no return address, only a pressed flower, willow, and a note reading, "Some appetites never die. We merely teach our daughters patience." The director, Edward Chambers, submitted the badge to authorities, but it subsequently disappeared from evidence storage. The official explanation cited clerical error, though the officer responsible for the evidence room reportedly resigned shortly thereafter, relocating to an undisclosed location. Chambers himself suffered a nervous breakdown 3 weeks after receiving the package. Before being institutionalized, he reportedly told his wife, "They're still out there, the Blackwood women. They never left. They just changed form." Chambers' statement was dismissed as paranoid delusion, a conclusion seemingly confirmed when he described receiving nightly visits from 3 women in 19th-century dress who smile but never speak. He remained institutionalized until his death in 1972. Hospital records indicate his final coherent words were, "They're here. They've always been here. The sisters just wear different faces now." His attending physician noted that Chambers' delusions showed remarkable consistency, particularly his insistence that the women were ageless and had been feeding on men since before the West was settled. When asked how such a thing could be possible, Chambers reportedly replied, "They found something, a method, a secret. You become what you consume. They discovered this by accident, I think. But once they knew, they refined it, perfected it. They're not just killers, they're collectors. They absorb, integrate, preserve." The physician's notes indicate that Chambers claimed to have found a journal fragment among Wilson's research materials, supposedly written by Martha Blackwood in 1879. He says the process extends us. Each one properly prepared and consumed adds their vitality to ours. We are more than we were. We contain multitudes now. Their strength, their knowledge, their years, all serve our purpose. The rendering method is key. A has perfected the formula. Nothing is wasted. Nothing truly dies. It merely transforms. Chambers' medical records were sealed upon his death and remain inaccessible to researchers. His body was cremated as specified in his will, though the attending mortician reportedly commented on the unusual condition of the corpse, describing the skin as having a peculiar waxy quality and the internal organs showing signs consistent with long-term consumption of unidentified substances. These observations were not included in official documents. Perhaps most unsettling of all, between 1962 and 1968, 3 separate researchers attempting to document the Blackwood case disappeared while conducting field investigations. In each instance, abandoned vehicles were discovered in remote locations. In each instance, searches yielded no bodies. In each instance, the missing person reports were filed, investigated, and eventually archived with the same final notation: no foul play suspected. Case inactive. The pattern extended beyond Nevada. In 1963, a journalist researching frontier crime in Wyoming disappeared while investigating historical properties outside Laramie. His last known communication was a telegram to his editor. Discovered connection between Blackwood, Nevada case and local disappearances. Stop interviewing elderly woman claiming knowledge of original incidents. Stop expect major breakthrough. His rental car was found at a remote crossroads with the keys in the ignition and his notebook open to a blank page. In 1965, a graduate student at the University of Montana vanished while researching a thesis on gender and criminal behavior in the American West, 1870-1900. Her abandoned campsite was discovered near the former location of a ranch operated briefly in the 1880s by three sisters from the East. Among her possessions was a journal containing the notation, "Local museum has ledger possibly connected to Blackwood sisters. Entries suggest systematic operation across multiple states." Need to verify handwriting against Nevada samples. The curator who had shown her the ledger reported that she seemed particularly interested in a section describing a special rendering process. When questioned about the ledger following the student's disappearance, the curator claimed no knowledge of such a document, insisting the museum had never possessed materials related to the case. His employment was terminated 6 months later due to unexplained discrepancies in artifact inventory. In 1967, a retired detective writing a book on unsolved frontier crimes disappeared from his Denver hotel room. His manuscript, found neatly stacked on the desk, contained a chapter titled "The Blackwood Sisters, America's First Female Serial Killers." The chapter ended mid-sentence. The most compelling evidence for the sisters' continued operation well into the 1890s comes from a series of remarkably similar cattle operations across Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, each associated with disappearances, and each. The remainder of the page was blank. A hotel maid reported seeing an elegant elderly woman visiting the detective the evening before his disappearance, though no such visitor was recorded at the front desk. These incidents might be dismissed as coincidence if not for one additional detail. In each case, pressed flowers were found among the missing person's belongings, willow, blackwood, and local flora from the relevant region. In 1968, following Chambers' institutionalization, a young journalist named David Keller attempted to compile these various disappearances into an investigative report for a regional newspaper. His editor, concerned about potential legal implications, declined to publish the piece. Keller then approached several national publications without success. His final attempt was a small historical journal that expressed interest but requested additional documentation. According to colleagues, Keller was elated by this development and mentioned having located a source who claimed to possess definitive evidence of the Blackwood sisters' activities well into the 20th century. Before he could submit the revised manuscript, Keller disappeared during a weekend camping trip in the Toyabe Range. His vehicle was discovered at a trailhead, with his camera and notes missing. Search efforts were hampered by unexpected snowfall and ultimately abandoned after yielding no results. Keller's apartment was examined following his disappearance. Neighbors reported seeing an elderly woman and two younger companions visiting the building the day before Keller was reported missing. No sign of forced entry was found, but Keller's research materials had been removed. The only item of interest remaining was a partially burned notebook page in the fireplace containing a list of locations and dates, with the notation, "Pattern continues, WI 1883, MT 1885, ID 1888, CO 1892, UT 1885, NV 1889, circular migration, return to origins, why Nevada again in 1962? The desert keeps its secrets. The wind carries away evidence." The frontier history of Nevada contains many dark chapters, some recorded, others deliberately obscured. The story of the Blackwood sisters, if that was indeed their name, represents a narrative thread that leads into shadows from which no conclusive truth has ever emerged. Only questions remain, whispered by the desert wind. Who were these women, really? How many fell victim to their methodical predation? And perhaps most disturbing of all, if Margaret Wilson's final notes hold any truth, do their descendants continue their legacy even now, in isolated places where people sometimes go missing and the local meat is said to possess a flavor like nothing you've ever tasted before? A postscript to this narrative, added by the Nevada Historical Review in 1968 before the journal's unexpected closure that same year. This account has been assembled from fragmentary records and testimonials of questionable reliability. Many primary sources have been lost to time or deliberate removal. What remains may represent only a shadow of the actual events at Willow Creek Ranch. The editorial board takes no position on the veracity of these claims, presenting them merely as a curious footnote to Nevada's territorial history. The journal ceased publication the following month. Its editor, Dr. James Hargrove, took early retirement and relocated to an undisclosed location. His final editorial noted only, "Some histories resist illumination. Some shadows are best left unexplored." The Blackwood case has claimed enough attention and perhaps enough lives. In the years since, occasional reports surface of remote ranching operations run by sisters or female cousins, producing exceptionally fine beef for premium markets. These operations typically exist for 2 to 3 years before closing when local interest becomes too pronounced. In several documented cases, such closures have coincided with unexplained disappearances in the surrounding area. Perhaps most disquieting is the pattern these operations follow, a pattern first established at Willow Creek Ranch in 1879. They select isolated locations with access to transportation routes. They maintain minimal social contact while establishing impeccable business reputations. They depart suddenly when circumstances require, leaving minimal evidence of their true activities. If you find yourself on a remote road in the American West and come upon a ranch operated by women of refined manner who offer exceptional hospitality and meat of remarkable quality, perhaps consider declining their invitation. Some traditions, it seems, never die. They merely adapt to changing times while maintaining their essential nature, like the desert itself, harsh and unforgiving beneath its serene surface. The wind across the Nevada desert still carries whispers for those who listen closely. Some say it carries the voices of those who discovered too late the true nature of the Blackwood sisters' hospitality. Others claim it carries a warning that echoes across time. Beware of isolated places where the unexplained disappearance of travelers is met with minimal inquiry, where cattle grow fat on mysterious feed, and where women of refined appearance welcome weary visitors with the promise of an exceptional meal. A curious footnote emerged in 1969 when a routine geological survey in the vicinity of the historical Willow Creek Ranch uncovered unusual soil composition in a specific area. Analysis revealed high concentrations of calcium and phosphorus consistent with significant bone deposits. When researchers attempted to conduct a more detailed examination, they discovered their funding suddenly withdrawn and the project reassigned. The lead geologist reportedly received an anonymous letter containing a pressed Blackwood flower and the message, "The ground keeps what is given to it. Some harvests should remain unexamined." The geologist abandoned his research and accepted a position at a university in Europe. Before departing, he sealed his preliminary findings in an envelope addressed to the Nevada Historical Society, with instructions that it remain unopened for 50 years. When the Society attempted to locate this envelope in the early 1970s, it had vanished from their archives. The archivist responsible for the collection reported receiving a visit from 3 women of varying ages but similar bearing the week before the document's disappearance was discovered. In 1972, a film student from Berkeley attempted to create a documentary about the Blackwood case based on newspaper accounts and public records. Her inquiries to various historical societies and archives met with unusual resistance. After managing to film at the approximate location of Willow Creek Ranch, she reported equipment malfunctions and unexplained audio interference. The footage, when developed, contained unexplained anomalies, sections of film exposed to light sources not present during filming, and audio recordings containing what sound engineers described as voices not present during production. Most disturbing was the final segment of footage, filmed as the student departed the ranch site at dusk. The camera, apparently accidentally left running, captured what appeared to be 3 female figures standing at the perimeter of the property, visible only as silhouettes against the setting sun. Audio analysis revealed a whispered voice not heard during filming. "They always return, the curious ones. Each generation sends new offerings." The student abandoned the project shortly thereafter, citing creative differences with her faculty advisor. She left the university before completing her degree and reportedly relocated to Europe, where she refused all subsequent inquiries regarding the Blackwood project. The land where Willow Creek Ranch once stood was purchased in 1975 by a corporation registered in Delaware with no listed principals. The property remains private, surrounded by fencing and marked with "No Trespassing" signs. Satellite imagery shows no structures or agricultural activity, only barren earth where vegetation should thrive in the high desert ecosystem. Local ranchers report that cattle refuse to approach the property line, becoming agitated when driven toward it. Wildlife similarly avoids the area, creating what naturalists describe as a dead zone in otherwise typical habitat. These observations remain anecdotal, as no formal scientific study has been conducted on the property due to access restrictions. In 1980, a historical preservation society attempted to designate the Willow Creek Ranch site as historically significant based on its connection to frontier criminal history. The petition was denied following intervention by unnamed state officials citing insufficient historical verification and potential economic impact on regional tourism. The Society's director received an anonymous delivery containing a pressed flower and a note reading, "History is written by those who survive to tell it. Some stories belong only to those who lived them." The Preservation Society disbanded shortly thereafter. Its records were donated to the state university, but were reportedly lost during transportation. The delivery driver claimed to have delivered the materials as directed, but could provide no receipt or confirmation. He resigned his position the following week and left the state without providing a forwarding address. As recently as 2004, hikers in the vicinity of the historical ranch site reported encountering 3 women of different ages but similar appearance who invited them to dinner at their nearby home. The hikers declined, citing their need to return before dark. Upon returning to town, they inquired about residents in the area and were informed that no occupied dwellings existed within 20 miles of their hiking route. When they attempted to locate the women's home the following day, they found no structure or road matching their recollection. The most recent documented incident connected to the Blackwood case occurred in 2009, when a true crime author researching frontier murders visited Virginia City to examine historical records. According to local reports, the author expressed particular interest in the Blackwood sisters and attempted to locate materials related to Margaret Wilson's 1962 research. During his stay, he reportedly befriended 3 women, described as grandmother, mother, and daughter, who operated a small specialty food shop. The author was last seen accepting an invitation to dinner at what he described to the hotel clerk as a ranch outside town, owned by his new acquaintances. His rental car was discovered 3 days later near the historical Willow Creek property. Despite extensive search efforts, no trace of the author was found. The food shop closed permanently the day following his disappearance, its proprietors leaving no forwarding information. Among the author's effects was a leather-bound journal containing his research notes. The final entry read, "The Blackwood case represents more than a historical curiosity. It suggests a pattern of predation that may have continued well beyond the documented incidents. Most intriguing is the recurrence of 3 women of similar description across multiple decades, far exceeding normal human lifespan. If not generational transmission of methodology, what explains this consistency? The ladies at the shop have invited me to dinner to discuss family recipes passed down since the 1870s. Their beef jerky has a remarkable flavor, unlike anything I've encountered. I'm particularly interested in their preparation methods." The journal contained one additional item, a business card for Blackwood Sisters Fine Meats, bearing the slogan, "A tradition of distinctive flavor since 1877, when authorities attempted to locate business records for the establishment. They found no documentation of its existence despite multiple witnesses confirming its operation for approximately 6 months prior to the author's disappearance. The tradition of oral warning persists among certain families in Story County. Avoid isolated ranches run by women of refined manner, decline invitations to dine regardless of how hospitable they appear, and never comment on the distinctive flavor of unfamiliar meat. These warnings are typically dismissed as frontier superstition by newcomers and tourists, yet local residents note that those who heed such cautions tend to enjoy longer lives. For those who study the darker aspects of American frontier history, the Blackwood case represents a disturbing counter-narrative to established mythology. Beyond the lawlessness typically attributed to male outlaws and gunslingers lies a more subtle predation, methodical, patient, and hidden behind society's unwillingness to perceive women as capable of calculated violence. The wind across the Nevada desert continues to whisper its secrets to those willing to listen. Among those whispers, some say, are the final pleas of Sheriff Jacob Westmore as flames consumed him on a cold December night in 1879, and the quiet laughter of 3 women who discovered that in a world that viewed them as prey, they could become the most effective predators of all. The desert keeps its secrets. The wind carries away evidence. But some stories refuse to remain buried, emerging generation after generation to remind us that the darkest chapters of history are those we refuse to acknowledge. The shadows behind the legends, the whispers beneath the documented record, the hunger that never dies but merely adapts to changing times. If you find yourself traveling the back roads of Nevada and encounter 3 women of different ages but similar bearing who invite you to share their hospitality, perhaps consider the wisdom of those who have heeded the local warnings for generations. Decline politely but firmly. Return to populated areas before nightfall, and never, under any circumstances, comment on the distinctive flavor of the meat they offer. For the Blackwood sisters, or whatever they call themselves in this generation, are said to still appreciate such compliments. They consider it acknowledgement of their artistry, their heritage, their unbroken tradition, dating back to that winter of 1879, when Sheriff Westmore made the most delightful sounds as the flames embraced him, and became perhaps the first but certainly not the last to contribute his essence to their distinctive recipe. The Blackwood legacy continues not merely in folklore, but in the occasional pressed flower left at historical sites, the periodic disappearances of those who investigate too deeply, and the whispered warnings passed down through generations of Nevada families. Some traditions never die. They merely adapt to changing times while maintaining their essential nature, like the desert itself, harsh and unforgiving beneath its serene surface.